Hello and welcome. I'm glad you could be with us today. We've got an important, powerful couple on, and we're going to talk about violence in our city, looking at the north side, but also the entire metro area here. We're taping on February 7th, 2022, and I think most of us who live in this area are sad, we're frustrated, we're angry. Amir Locke was just killed, and we're processing that and trying to figure out more what's happening. So I'm going to ask my guests, who are Sondra and Don Samuels. And you probably know of them or know them from all their work they've done here in our community. Powerhouse couple. Sondra is the founder and CEO and president of NAZ, the Neighborhood Achievement Zone. And we've done a couple shows talking about that wonderful, wonderful organization. Can you just define, before we introduce your husband, define your mission in a brief way, Sondra?
Yes, absolutely. And Mary, so great to be on your show again. So the Northside Achievement Zone, NAZ, is a collaboration of over 25 nonprofits and schools, housing, health, career, early childhood, K through 12 schools, after school summer program, colleges, and then we do a whole host of parenting education classes. And our goal is to create a culture of achievement in all over North Minneapolis, so that our children graduate high school, college, and career ready, and then matriculate into college and graduate in some form of post-secondary. And we just, we believe that no nonprofit, no government entity, no business, no neighbor can do it alone. And we need each other.
Takes a village.
It takes a village, and we've been a village on steroids. And we've seen some incredible outcomes with close to 1,000 families, 2,000 children 0 to 18. We focus largely on the African American community in North Minneapolis, low income. We do have Latinx community as well. And we've been at it for over 10 years now, Mary.
Is it 10? I was trying
It's
to
been
think
over
when
10 years
when
now,
you started.
and still a goal that our children that we will nurture them to success.
I want to bring you in, Don, but then I want to come back and ask you
Yes.
something about the gap that we have here in Minnesota. Don, you are the president and CEO of MicroGrants, and this is an organization that you've inherited, so to speak.
Yes,
Joe
from
Salvaggio.
the great philanthropist, Joe Salvaggio.
We all love that man, don't we?
Joe love it. Joe love it.
Yeah, and so after 10 years, I kind of took the reins from Joe Salvaggio. He started MicroGrants. MicroGrants makes small grants, they're growing, up to $4,000 to low-income people who are starting a business or a career, or need to grow it and need a boost. There's some obstacle that a couple grand will help them get past. And there's a big fallout in small businesses and low-income folks starting a career. As people come up against obstacles, they kind of, big failure rate. That's where we come in. We help people pass those obstacles and launch them into self-sufficiency.
And your success rate, I was looking up some statistics. It's very impressive in terms of the money you give, in terms of the outcomes with.
Yes, because we
individuals.
make grants through partner agencies. Like Sondra's group, we
Real
have
parallel.
50 partners agencies, and they actually train people for work and business. And when those people come up against an obstacle, they don't have the money, the cash, to hand them to say, here, go repair your appliance, or here's help to buy a car. And so they refer them to us for a microgrant, and we step right in, just like a rich uncle would, because most of our people are actually the most progressive person in their family, and yet they are in the margins, and so we step in and help them. We also have the Lights On program, where after Philando Castile was killed, for a broken light.
Oh, right, I've read about this too.
We came up with a Lights On program, so now in 90% of the state of Minnesota, and in about 15 cities across the country, 15 states, when you get pulled over by a police officer, instead of a ticket or a lecture or worse, violence, you get a voucher to fix that light, no matter what exterior light it is, for free, up to $250. So all that stress and tension and confrontation is now transformed into conversation and gratitude and a transformation of perceptions.
A real positive outcome from that,
Yes.
just immediately, I'm guessing.
Yes, immediately.
Yeah.
And we've done that about 7,000 times, so that's a lot of transformed interactions.
Yeah. That's, yeah, both of these are wonderful organizations. Just a point I want to ask you both about. I think in Minnesota there is kind of a broad denial of how we're not doing as well as we think we are as a group. You know, in terms of the gap between home ownership for blacks and whites, the gap between high school graduation, a lot of trouble with with children being born early with lots of issues. And I don't think a lot of Minnesotans see us as having severe problems in those areas like we do. Do you have to sort of fight this myth, in a sense, with your work to persuade people that, no, we're not doing as well as we could?
Yeah, Mary, that's such a great point. And yes, it is constant education around the gaps, right?
Yeah.
And we call them the opportunity gaps, right? In education and health and wealth and longevity and incarceration, early childhood. I keep saying that, George Floyd's murder that was an eye-opener. So all the way, so it opened eyes of folks who weren't listening to the disparities even in the criminal justice system and the disparate treatment of African American citizens in the state and in the city. And so finally, the confluence of COVID and everybody's home and we all have our cell phones and then the egregious murder of George Floyd finally woke people up to what African Americans had been saying for years. But the murder of George Floyd is the tip of the disparities iceberg in this state, right? The tip. Because the danger is also what's below the waterline, right?
What we don't see.
What we don't see. And that gets to the education and health and wealth and all the other things that we're talking about. And so finally, George Floyd's daughter said, Daddy changed the world.
Yeah.
And
that was the young little 7-year-old daughter.
5-year-old,
yeah. And what I would say is Daddy opened up some Minneapolis eyes.
Yes, he did. Now, Amir Locke was killed this week. How are you processing this?
Well, it goes to show how deep the culture of devaluing of black life is. That even after repeated incidents where decisions are made that lead to tragic outcomes for African Americans, that the culture is so deep. And it's not just police culture, by the way. As you're saying, it's all that housing and education and so on. The culture is so deep that even great public demonstrations of it can't lead to change. And we had on our parenting show on Sunday,
Which we should plug. We'll do that in a minute.
Power to the parents. We had someone on from the
Diane Halsey.
Diane
from
Halsey.
Think Small, and she has her own podcast, Early Risers, around talking to young children about racism.
About race, yes. And the thing she talked about in one of her blogs with a psychologist or neurologist.
Dr. Damian Fair of the Masonic Institute for Brain Development.
Yes, is the association of blackness with certain other negativities. So, for instance, if somebody shows you a picture of a table and a knife, there's no kind of reaction neurologically for it. But if somebody shows you a picture of a black person and a knife, your brain lights up. Or a gun, or something, a word that's negative. These are all internal neurological responses, automatic responses, triggered by lifetimes of orientation by media and so on of what black means. And so when you say someone needs to go through some process as a professional to undo those prejudices, very often people resent that because they think you're saying they are bad people. They're racist and they're bad. But these are American traits growing out of America's history and media and conversations at the table and little nonverbal cues. And so it's important for the police department to begin to understand that when you take all of that neurological reality and put a gun in someone's hand on top of it, and a young black man starts to get up, whereas you might, for a young white man, say, drop that gun, or, immediately you have a deeper sense of urgency and fear, and you act in ways that are prejudiced.
I'm assuming that the policeman who shot Amir was Caucasian.
Yes.
As far as you know, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
And Mary, I just want to add to what Don was saying, that the research is showing that children 2 to 6 months know the difference with caregivers who are not their racial group.
Really?
And respond.
Oh
And
my-
by the time they're two to 4 years old, they associate negativity to blackness. Like this is just it's just like what happens.
Ingrained kind of.
Yes. And
Oh,
so
that's-
I was at a press conference today with black women. And in fact, I brought some
let's
flyers
show
here.
the
Justice
poster.
for
Can we get
Amir.
there, yeah. It's,
And I
caption.
want Don and I want unequivocally to say that we feel as though the killing of Amir happened because he was black. But because if it was, we believe, based on what we just talked about, just the pure science, that if it was a white young man, that there would have been a different reaction
a slower
to him.
not
Absolutely.
that
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. With a permit to carry. I mean, and so at the press conference today, Mary, when you ask how are we feeling, like as a black mother and woman, I can't. These are our children. They're our children, and Amir was just a good kid who legally had a gun. Because he'd been robbed before. He was DoorDash, he did DoorDash and things of that nature, legally had a gun. And we had a young man who lived with us, and we could not, if he wasn't getting up on his own, to try to wake him up, I'd like, should I go get a bucket of water? And so the
deep sleeper.
Yes,
Deep sleeper,
and
yeah.
the thought that this law-abiding, no-record young man, life of his family, permit carrying, he wanted to do things right, was startled out of his sleep, right, with his gun. Mary, we just know that if he was a white 20, so often, and one mom said it today, that white young men make it out alive. They make it out. Something just happened recently.
Even after mass killings.
After mass killings. You
They're
remember the
captured-
mass killing?
Yeah, they're captured.
They took the white kid to McDonald's.
Yeah.
One of the cops took him to McDonald's, the one who killed all of the people. I think it was at the church.
Yes.
Right? He said he was hungry.
Mother Emanuel.
And they took him to
Burger King.
McDonald's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Burger King.
Yeah.
But the racism is real.
Yeah.
It's real. And it's causing the lives of our children. And we have a system that absolutely is broken, that needs to be fixed. And Don and I have stood firmly on a both-and solution.
You're not saying it's just the police system that's
Right.
No, absolutely not.
needing total reform, but the
Yes.
whole
Well,
culture.
we're working on all of it.
Well, you both are working
Yes,
hard.
absolutely. And in fact, our work stems from the fact that we live in North Minneapolis, which at the time we moved in the Jordan neighborhood, was the most violent neighborhood in Minneapolis. And that's a pledge we took because we understood that part of the demise of communities is the middle class flight. And that if the cause of a problem can be identified, then the simplest solution would be the reversal of that cause.
Right.
Right? And so we put our lives on the line in that way to say it's the absence of the black middle class, for sure, middle class in general, but for sure black middle class, why there are isolated communities of low-income people. And so if the simplest thing to do is for us to buy a house there.
So back in what year did you buy it? It's been, your
It's been
kids
over
grew up
20
there,
years.
didn't they?
Yep,
20
it's been
years.
over 20
So-
years. Yeah.
And so that led to everything we do today.
Yeah, it led to everything.
And you two are considered real leaders of the North Side. But as you said to me just a little while ago, you don't want to just talk tonight about North Side violence because there's increasing serious violence all over the metro area, but disproportionate.
Right.
Can you
absolutely.
give us a little, some statistics on the disproportionate ratio? Do you
Well,
know?
you know, last year, for example, of all the, so we almost tied the record set in like 1995 or 1996, where we were dubbed Murderapolis.
Right.
So then it was 97 murders. We had 96 murders last year.
Okay, I
Right.
didn't. And that's
Right.
just
So
in the
generation
north,
historical.
Is that just in the North Side?
No. That was
Oh,
citywide.
The whole city. Okay.
Right, but you know there are 5 precincts, so Northside is just one precinct
Right,
out of the
right.
5. But we were 50% of those murdered,
Oh, were you?
50% of those shot, right? And so the disproportionality when we have a breakdown in our system of policing, when we have a breakdown in our system of community supports, the isolation, the systemic racism, like there's been a conspiracy of things, right? But it is impacting, and this is going on all across the country, all
Right,
across the country.
right.
And policing has to be fixed. Like we so it's not just policing, but we got to isolate policing
Are
and
you-
say we need to fix that.
Are you finding that the young people that you know well on the North Side are distrusting our police more than you've seen in the past right now?
I'd say everybody is.
Yeah, everybody is.
Everybody,
Yeah,
including
is.
the young people.
I'm not sure it's worse for the young people in the community because they just weren't heard.
Right.
Yeah, they
Right.
just
That's
weren't
an
heard.
interesting way to.
Right.
So a young man lived
Think
with
of
us during
Yeah.
his high school career, and he spent the summer in Duluth for 1 year when he was 15, 14, and while he was there, his mom sent him on an errand and say, "Hurry up and run and go do this," and he was running. He got stopped, put in the back of a truck, of a police car, and kind of intimidated for a little bit
And
Just
roughed
be-
up.
and roughed up.
Because he was
Black.
Because he was
nothing
black.
else.
And he was a small 14-year-old. He wasn't a big kid. And then on another occasion, he was coming from the barber shop to our house, which was about 5 blocks, and a police car followed him at walking pace the entire 5 blocks
Oh my gosh.
to the house, up till he got up the stairs. And so, young people have been having these experiences, but when a black kid says that, who is he going to say it to? He's saying it
Who's
to his black
listening?
friends. And if he says it to his white friends, very often the answer is, "Are you sure?"
So they're defensive.
Yeah, my daughter went into a store at the Mall of America. They followed her around. She came out with her white friends, about 3 girls, and they told them about it. She said, "No, we didn't
Yeah,
see
she said,
that."
"Did you see that guy following me?"
Yeah.
No, like
No.
you're
seeing
You're
Yeah.
being paranoid.
Yeah, you're being
Yeah.
a little paranoid. Yeah.
And so that was the incredible gift that George Floyd gave to all of us.
So sort of a silver lining.
Yeah, absolutely,
To say
absolutely.
that, yes, it is real.
Yes, it is real.
And that's why you saw so many young people hit the streets, because
It
they had
was-
sort of heard it from their friends or heard about it, then it is real.
Well, the
Yes.
protests, as I watched them around the country, were people of all races, of
Yes.
all
Yes,
ages,
yes,
all
absolutely.
types of people.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the situation right now on the north side and in the metro area, what are some of the things that you think we need to be looking at? We don't have a lot of time left.
Yes.
For solutions. And you're both working, I was thinking, so hard in solution-based organizations, and yet there's so much yet to do. But where do you think we need to put, as a community,
Yep.
our biggest efforts?
Well, let me say that, I have an organization to run and to promote, but I got to tell you, it's our children. And if we can be pulled in by the needs of our children and seduced by their innocence, and begin to work on their behalf, then we will go from there to see what they need at home, right? What they need on the streets, what they need after school, what they need in the summer. And
In
that
school.
And in school.
yeah.
And that will lead us into the other solutions. But the children are a perfect entry point because we are still kind of sympathetic to children.
We all love children,
all love
right?
children,
We all love
We all
children.
love children.
And so the great thing about the Northside Achievement Zone is it's bringing organizations together in the service of children and families, and it's the disintegration of the social fabric. That is one of the key points that has led to all of these chronic problems, where you have transient communities, renters moving, and people who begin to make more money leave the community to become suburbanites. And this rapid turnover of home ownership and renter stability, so that people can't build the bonds.
And then exploitive landlords
yes.
that move in right in the middle. Yeah, and so, it really gets to place-based, that we have to not address symptoms of what's been ailing us as a society, but actually get at transforming the communities that are disproportionately impacting by investing in them. There's been so much disinvestment. That's really what you're talking
Right.
about. And a both-and solution, because we're talking about violence as well. Because
Yeah.
we know that when we invest in communities like this, it transforms outcomes and violence goes down. And so when we're talking about police, because policing is part of the conversation, that we need to reform policing. We need transparency, accountability, like justice for Amir now, like gotta have it. And we need enough police to keep our city safe. And we need the supports in a community. The violence prevention, we have violence interrupters now, and the investment in community, right? So it's the both and we keep being asked to choose sides.
Yeah,
And
there is
Don's
a
point,
sense.
our side should be our children
Right.
and our most vulnerable.
Yeah.
So come at it from all angles.
Yes.
Yes.
All layers of society,
Layers.
the church, the
Yes.
schools, the government.
Yes. And not just the symptoms.
Yes.
And if you notice on TV, when you have medicine that addresses a symptom, irritable bowel syndrome
Right,
or something,
right.
after a while they tell you this could cause blindness, it could cause
Right,
rashes,
right.
it could
Even
cause
death.
Death.
Right.
No.
That's what happens when you address symptoms.
You're not getting
But when you get at the
rid of the
Right. So you could
cause.
say, let's get rid of the police because they killed Amir or they killed George Floyd. That's a symptom. And if you get rid of them, there'll be a lot of unintended consequences. Right? So we have to have holistic solutions. Go to the root cause. And so it's great to see people marching against a symptom, which is great. It brings attention and it does say we got to root out. But unless we get to the causes, then the disparities will encroach again. Unjust policing will come again, because when you're policing vulnerable people who are disconnected from power and government, then you can be reckless, right? That will all return in another generation, in another iteration. But if we can build our children up and build our families up and keep them geographically in place so that the North Side doesn't become the place you leave once you're thriving, because that has got a stigma to it. Or that living around African American people is not something you avoid because there's a stigma to the people. Once we get over that fake version of the American dream, which is destroying communities that are populated primarily by minorities or that have been historically low income, then we will begin to heal. Because we are not right now, if you do well in North Minneapolis, you leave.
So you're seeing
All
a
around the country.
flight,
All
which
around
has
the
gotta
country
be
from neighborhoods like this.
so upsetting when you put your feet and said we're staying,
Yes.
and yet their friends are leaving.
Yes.
We're out of time. I want to let you each say one thing just briefly in conclusion. We're going to put their websites for MicroGrants and NAS on the screen so you can do more thinking and reading and supporting of their groups. But as a concluding statement here, if it's possible.
Concluding from me
Oh.
is this is, and Mary, you know I had this on before.
Yes,
We give this to parents who graduate from our College Bound Babies program.
Yeah,
Parents who
that's
have children 0 to 3, and this is when one of our youngest babies will graduate from a 4-year college.
That's such
And
a
so,
cool.
you know, so what I would say is that investing in places, in communities, and holding systems and authorities accountable for transparency and justice is what will transform our country.
Well put, Don.
Yeah, and I would say that symptoms are, addressing symptoms are not the solution, but it is an entryway into the real problem.
Yeah.
And if we can just see George Floyd's death, the police brutality, etc., get involved in that. But don't stop there. That's just symptomatic. Let that lead you into saying, what happened in George's life? What happened when he was a kid? Where did he live? What were the conditions of his life that led to him being under the knee of a police officer? And what happened in Chauvin's home around racial issues? Then we can begin to heal really at the root and not just keep spending money on symptoms.
Look underneath the tip of the iceberg.
Yes.
Right?
Yes,
Yes.
be willing to go
Under that
beyond what is
waterline,
evident. Yes.
Well, thank you both so much for coming down. I wish we had more time, but this has been really important to hear, and I hope you've helped enlighten people that are tuning in tonight. I'm sure you have. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Been talking with both Sandra and Don Samuels. Thank you for joining us. I know you'll be like me and say we need more time. I'll get them back. Thanks. See you next week. Bye-bye.